Hello, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Jacqueline Dorsey of Lean Frontiers, and I'll serve as your host today. I'm excited to bring to you today a short webinar on Lean HR's impact on the Lean enterprise, facilitated by one of North America's most experienced facilitators, Cheryl Jekiel. So for now, let me turn things over to Cheryl.
Hello, everyone. Pleasure to be here to present to you today on the topic of Lean Human Resources. This is going to be an overview of just the top line of what Lean Human Resources is about, as well as how it can provide a high impact on a Lean enterprise. So I am currently the Senior Director of Organizational Effectiveness for Tri-Arrows Aluminum. I'm in Louisville, Kentucky. I am also the founder of the Lean Leadership Resource Center, which is a range of resources that link to leadership concepts. So it's been recently launched. It's basically just a place for a clearinghouse, so to speak, of different kinds of resources. And it has a new website in which I've listed here. So as we get into the topic of thinking about Lean Human Resources, I want to start with thinking about what a traditional business model is like compared to a Lean enterprise model. So traditionally, you think of a company might sell a product and then they make the product and then it goes out to the customer, and then the support functions sit underneath that as a way of supporting those core processes between making things and selling things. So a Lean enterprise, which is different, is they look for everything that the organization does, every person, every activity needs to add as much value as possible, and so it's a part of minimizing non-value added efforts. So in that way, I think of Lean HR as one of the support functions that needs to be able to add value through the sales function and through operations, and in a way that eventually touches the customer. Sometimes in a way they might feel directly and sometimes indirectly. But it's strengthening that whole role, that it's not underneath, but it's instead really trying to have a direct impact on the business. We're going to talk about 5 ways to make that happen. But in that, the way I think about it is Lean HR is like can be the engine on the boat. And so I think it becomes more of a guiding principle to think of it, how can human resources be the power on things instead of like something that reacts, like the business does what it's going to do and it reacts instead. So it's not reactionary, it's actually a core driver. So we're going to talk today about 5 ways to create high-impact HR in Lean enterprises. The first way, so I'm going to have specific suggestions, is to increase the alignment of HR activities to impact external customers. And just an example of that would be training programs that would heighten awareness of customer needs and build customer service skills. Now that could be both internal and external. So what I've seen is training or other kinds of communications that make it more clear how departments feed each other. That's the internal customer piece. But certainly also a lot of times making the external customers who they are, what they need, what they think, bringing that into the workplace. So that could be traditional training or other forms of communication. But being clear for those activities, it's of real impact when you align things to what your customer focus is. So what it doesn't look like is, so the next page is, or the next slide is talking about being aware of when the focus is so much on things like administration or compliance, what's the policy, or are we following the law? I'm in no way meaning that those things don't need to be done. They certainly do need to be done. But when HR becomes, that's their focal point, then it can end up, kind of feeling like it's on the outside of the business. So looking at what kinds of HR activities can be more in the direct stream of things, what you're making and what you're selling and what the customers need, and being aware of the kinds of activities that can leave HR on the outside. And as I said, I'm just saying reducing the focus on these areas and not saying not to do them or that they don't need to be done. I'm certainly well aware that they do. I mean, been in human resources for over 25 years. So that's just some things to think about. The second way is to increase expectations for HR performance. In general, from my experience in the field, HR is not always expected to be a core part of the business in terms of understanding the business focus. So if I would walk up to an HR person oftentimes and say, what are the core business metrics of your unit? What's the revenue of either the unit you're in or the business you're in? You know, ask questions about overtime rates, or, you know, what are the current CapEx needs? They, you know, sometimes it used to be they wouldn't really quite know what we were talking about. What I've seen in a lean enterprise, it's critical that HR, as they become more value added, be completely familiar with the core business issues, including the financials, and most importantly, how HR activities are touching those. So in what way can HR impact, you know, overtime levels or other kinds of key business factors? Where do we help recruit? Let's say my HR be helping to recruit key people that will have significant business impact. Like, what's the ROI on certain positions? If you hire a critical purchasing person who may bring in several $1 million of savings, then how do you link that work with what its real business impact is, instead of I'm just hiring a purchasing manager because that's what they've asked of me. So being less reactionary and more clear really what the business impact of activities are. What I would caution people away from, and I've experienced in my own work, both for myself and certainly HR groups I've worked with, is being in more of this maintenance mode. That, you know, we're busy, you know, either reacting to things or taking care of things, and it's another year of getting things done. Performance reviews are done, increases are done, employee relations are handled, and you want to stay away from, you know, another year of maintaining things. I think in a lean enterprise that is really looking to raise the bar of how they operate, human resources is one of the areas that says if we really raise the bar, what's that going to look like? So being aware, using caution when you're in the mode of maintenance. And I use this in a way to work with each and every HR person to say, if you were going to be, you know, really shifting your gears, what might that look like in a motivating way? The third way is to increase focus on the highest priorities. So in talking about being, you know, high impact and adding more value, making sure you're really thinking about what are your organization's biggest roadblocks and how can HR help. So it's important, a lot of times I'll ask a staff member, so what is the biggest issue in front of us? And sometimes when I get a deer in the headlight looks, that's what tells me that we need to stop and refocus our energy on understanding what's the most critical thing going on in our business, and is that what we're focusing on? It can really be easy sometimes, looking to the next, is you're working on initiatives that are standard. There was a year, I remember when this first came up for me, that I was very aware of it. We were busy putting in a leadership training program, and it had supervisory skills, and yet the business itself was in a crisis over how we had the right skills in the right place in terms of our technical people. So here the HR department is busy putting in what it, you know, what we were thinking was a good thing to do, and yes it is, and it was commonly done, and yet it was not necessarily aligned with the most critical needs on the floor. The other day I was talking to a company who was busy bringing lean HR in, and they said, you know what, we had to almost throw out our original agenda of what we were working on and just stop and go out and talk to our customers, our inside customers, and find out what they most needed from us real time, and then reset our agenda to that. So that's the kind of thing I'm thinking about. Again, these are no hard and fast rules. It's just really rechecking if the things that the HR group is aligned to are the most important topics of the day. Number 4 is developing a service attitude. And this has been an interesting area with a lean frame of mind in looking at how human resources operates. So as things first became visible, there was a thought that, you know, what are HR metrics? It's probably been a common topic for about the last, I don't know, at least over 10 years. HR metrics, there's books written on it, there's seminars on it. And it got to be, so how could you measure whether HR was having value? So the most common metrics initially would be, let's say, things like turnover rates. Have you reduced your turnover rate? Or time to market? How long did it take to hire people? Those kinds of things. How many hours of training had gone on? Those were measurable. And again, I think all of those are valuable items. But in looking at how human resources compares to a service function, so in terms of its optimal value, I've often said to people, so if you went in a restaurant and said, and they told you, you know, this year you are eating in a restaurant that is serving meals 7% faster than last year, I'm not really sure as a customer what that might mean to you. Or if you went to a hotel and they said, we have reduced our complaint rate by 11% year over year. I'm not sure if that's what you're looking to hear. When most of us are receiving a service anywhere, it's whether it met our needs at the time. So whether you're eating in a restaurant or going to a hotel or getting some kind of service, it's about whether it's meeting your needs. And so it's completely in your own perception, and it really has to do with whether your needs were met at the time. So I've been shifting the focus in using lean principles to focusing this completely on a matter of whether the customer thinks it adds value. So by doing that, we've been using surveys. So an example would be giving a service type survey to people that you've hired in the last year and asking a range of questions from their perception. How well did the hiring process meet their needs? Did they feel they were communicated with? How did they feel each part of the background check was handled? How was onboarding? How was this part of the service? And as a service survey, it's been giving us tremendous knowledge about where to tailor our services to better meet the needs. The same with the hiring managers. It's not just how many days did it take us to complete the task, but to how many different ways it did or didn't meet their needs. The very fact that we do service satisfaction surveys, on very specific areas already tells people that we care very much about the kind of service we provide. So anybody who might want more information about that, I would be happy to send you some examples of what we're doing in the area of service satisfaction levels compared to some traditionals. Now these are not instead of employee satisfaction or engagement type surveys. It's not the same thing, and it's not instead of that. This is more setting the bar for improvement around service at times more than just these metrics that while they are measurable, they are not necessarily measuring to our customer's point of view what would matter to them. So it's really asking us if the thing you're measuring from an internal or external customer's point of view would matter. By the way, one of the ideas in this area is to remember the culture that a company has that an external customer would perceive, so however your outside customers perceive your company, is very much directly linked to the way the culture operates internally. So the more you create a service environment through the HR department, it's just one key area, that in the end really does impact the outside, because that sets the tone that that's how you're going to treat each other internally, in which case can be perceived from the outside. There's research showing that the external brand of a company can very much be impacted by driving the internal branding or culture of an inside your company. Now the fifth area, the fifth way to drive high impact lean human resources is by leveraging the diversity of skills. So similarly to the way in a production environment that lean often lends itself to expanding what's inside roles, to people doing teamwork, leading, as well as working with different parts of the company. What I've had some interesting experiences the more we've practiced lean human resources is new experiments with how we've teamed up, especially with finance and IT. Now this is not necessarily, it's all of us would probably work with in human resources, other departments, including finance and IT. I think what we're talking about here, it's to the degree you're working together and how often you might look to these other departments to work with you. So it's not, so an example would be if there's an ERP project, an introduction of an ERP project, you might often see human resources or organizational development working with finance and IT, because that kind of project would typically run that way. What I'm speaking with is more if you just simply looked at even your largest HR areas that you're going to be working on, or how you're going to impact the largest issues, where can you take the hand of the other support functions and figure out how you could synthesize your skills more cohesively to provide better solutions. And the more and more I've done that, I've had great success at a level we hadn't seen before. We realized they were conversations we often hadn't had. So an example is we were looking at a recruiting effort, and we were having large levels of recruiting, and we're struggling to get enough of the organization around the applications and the people and sifting through things. And we were aware that we needed to buy a system, and so from a human resources department, we were out in the marketplace speaking with different vendors and even other HR departments and other companies about what we could buy to solve those needs. Well, in part of this effort, we started to have some planning sessions with finance people and IT people to go out this problem together. And what we found when we coordinated our skills and added them together, we were coming up with much stronger options of how to approach the problem. So we changed our intranet internally to better meet our needs. Our IT professionals had whole ideas of how they would approach purchasing any new systems. And what we developed in the long run was a coordinated look of how HR, finance, and IT all presented themselves together instead of separately. And the more we did that, we found our work products were enhanced for all three of us. So I think my point is it's a matter of reducing, it's about the silos. It's, you know, someone once said to me, the greatest opportunity in front of us is the space between, it's optimizing the space between the silos. So it's yes, each department is being strong, but one way I would encourage you to think about lean human resources is to what degree can we optimize the space between the departments, not just in and of themselves. And in that way, it really holds true to the value of process. So the same way when we look in production facilities and we say instead of looking at each production cell by itself, how can we pull them more together so we take the waste out and increase the value? Well, the same is true, especially in the support functions. There has historically, and in traditional environments, a lot of distance that's typically found between the functions, that finance or IT or HR are quite separate, similarly to other functions like quality or operations or sales. The more the human resources group can help pull that together and see what's in between these, what's in those gaps that we can now optimize by reducing that look at each group like a silo. Okay, so to recap, what we're talking about today is how lean human resources can be creating more high impact for a lean enterprise. And it's looking at the idea that traditional organizations often basically underutilize support functions. And so when we looked at, initially when we looked at lean enterprises, we said, well, the first thing is they were looking at operations and a way to make products more effectively to enhance the business operations. There has been some work in the area of lean in sales, but we're also increasing to have more appreciation to how the support functions, if they truly became drivers in the business, might have a huge impact on the results. So to get there, I would encourage you to think about ways that your staff can impact your external customers, to raise the performance bar for human resources, number 2. Number 3, to make sure you're prioritizing work based on the ability to impact your business. So that's looking at that major roadblock. What's the most important work that you could be focusing on to impact your business? Number 4, develop an attitude of service that is pronounced in your business, that when you think of human resources, that's the group that is all about service. And then really consider how that accomplishes number 1, which is impact not only your inside customers, but your outside customers as well. And then number 5, to leverage the diversity of skills. So being smart about where are there opportunities to work together in teams differently and more cohesively. You know, the word I would use is maybe to synthesize the skills. So really challenge yourself for the ways to work together that you never have before and see what you can get out of that. So that's the key points I'm making today in terms of about how lean human resources can have a greater impact and drive more performance. This is just an introductory. We're excited that there is an annual Lean Human Resources Summit. I would encourage any of you who are interested in learning more about how human resources is a critical component to a lean enterprise. I would encourage you to attend. We would love to have more people there each year to strengthen this community. If you have any questions about any of this or this topic in general, please just send those on to Lean Frontiers, to Jacqueline or anyone else in that group, and they will either find whoever would be best suited to answer your questions. But we encourage you to inquire more on this topic. Thank you so much for your attention today.
All right. Cheryl, thank you for facilitating our session today. You can meet Cheryl in person as she keynotes the annual Lean HR Summit being held May 14th and 15th in Jacksonville, Florida. Hear from Cheryl and more than a dozen leading Lean HR practitioners. Visit www.leanhrsummit.com for more information. As mentioned previously, today's webinar is being recorded. Look for an email following our time together for a link to the recording. Feel free to share this throughout your organization. So again, thank you, Cheryl, and thanks to each of you for participating in today's session. Goodbye.